Hello, wonderful wonders of the internet. It's finally time. After 3 long years, I'm finally ready to talk about my favorite series of all time. I don't know if I was scared before because I didn't want to see what I truly thought of the series, or if I didn't want to critique it at all, but with the release of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I can hold back my passion no longer. Yes! I think it's finally time. You already know that Tears of the Kingdom is a follow-up to Breath of the Wild, one of Zelda's biggest titles in years. But can a game reusing the same open world really keep up with all these new open world games coming out that everyone and their mother seems to be making these days? Or will it simply be a boring retread? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's dive into the world of Hyrule. Well, it looks pretty steep. I don't know if I really want to... To dig into a world this massive, we've got to break it into chunks. And I'm thinking something along the lines of traversal, exploration, the world, story, mechanics, enemies, dungeons, and of course, quests. And we'll do this on the new WoW system. No, not World of Warcraft. Ugh. No, what I'm thinking about is a 3 ranking system that shows me how I think about different parts of the game. We have, whoa, the parts of the game that really blew me away. Okay, parts of the game that were just middling. And what? Parts of the game that just made you go, what were they thinking? Yikes. Oof. Zoinks. I think we gotta start by talking about the world. You see, this game's biggest point of contention on release was that it was reusing the same world as Breath of the Wild, and as a sequel that was quite a hit against its originality. But it also had the sky and the depths, which, if I have to rank the 3 of them, they probably go something like, bip bop boom. Yeah, the sky wasn't really my favorite, but let me tell you why. There were highlights, don't get me wrong, like the wind and water temple. And the climb up to the wind temple is actually one of the highest points of the game, I think. Get it? Highest. But what these sky islands do show is an emphasis on verticality. Yes, in Breath of the Wild, when you came across a vertical surface, it was kind of painful to realize that you'd have to slowly climb up it. But in Tears of the Kingdom, you can just straight up phase through walls and go straight up that way, or you can use a rocket or a hot air balloon. The options are really infinite. You can pretty much get over it in mere seconds. But for the most part, sky islands were generally uninteresting to me. You could fly up to them and perhaps get a shrine or Korok, but they didn't really have enough interesting and unique mechanics to keep me involved the whole way through. So usually I just ended up using them as teleport points to dive down to the more interesting world below. Fortunately, as I dive back down into the main world, it hardly ever feels like a retread or repeat of Breath of the Wild. With the new expanded Tarrey town and the new Lookout Landing, I think the world could have used a few new towns, like perhaps a mole town underground or a sky outpost town, but at least every village has something going for it, like the ruins in Kakariko Village, or the pirates that are attacking Lurelin Village. And aside from the villages, the whole map of the game is pretty different thanks to some regional weather events that are happening, thanks to Ganon's evil influence in the world. Yes, the Ritos are frozen in their village, unable to move out. The Gerudos are trapped in a sandstorm and hunted by the Gerudo zombies. And Death Mountain is cooling down. And there's also a new company to explore. But that company has gone mad. With Moon Rock Gaze or something. I don't know, it's like Weed Rock. I don't know. It's weird. And then the Zora Village. They have mud. That's it. There's just mud. That's kind of lame. I don't really like that one. Each of these create new traversal struggles as you go throughout the lands that you can tackle with your new abilities, as well as being able to save all these races from very real threats that could actually make them go extinct. It's a lot more intense than the walking around mechanic beasts of Breath of the Wild that really didn't seem like much of a threat, they were just kind of minding their own business. But the depths, oh, the depths. I love the depths in this game. I think they're so special because Nintendo didn't really tell us anything about it before the game launched. And diving into that depths, oh, the feeling you get is that Zelda magic that I've come to love. It's mysterious, it's foreboding, it's epic. A whole new world that rivals the size of Hyrule right beneath our noses. And I've got 2 major highlights to talk about. I started off my journey going to Death Mountain, And I heard this city of Garandia, like this lost Goron city, this ancient civilization, and I thought nothing of it, maybe thinking it would be some kind of side quest or something down the road. But upon entering the depths in Death Mountain, I saw this massive looming structure ahead, and it was then that I realized the depth's potentials. The ability to hide massive structures in plain view, as long as you're willing to dive into the darkness. My second highlight is when I was cruising around on a plane in the depths, and suddenly I hear boss music, a scream, and a health bar appears on my screen, and I'm tackled out of the sky by a boss refight that I didn't even know existed in the depths. This is just one of the ways the depths hides its secrets in the shadows and keeps you on edge as you explore it, along with the broken heart system that every time you take damage, you can't recover it until you see the light of day once more. I was always on edge in the depths, not knowing what was staring back at me from the darkness. But, luckily for me, there are light routes that help light up your path as you explore the depths. These will help you find things like the Yiga hideouts, the mines, the grand mines, boss refights, enemy camps, and of course, dungeons. Truly, there was never a lack of things to do in the depths, and just the fact that it doubled the game map in size makes up for the lackluster Sky Islands portion of the game. Traversal is now intrinsically linked to the new mechanic of the game, the fuse mechanic. Now, anything you see can be created into a vehicle by just fusing them together, using new Zonai parts that you can get from the Sky Island dispensaries. Your creativity can get kind of wild at times, but most likely you'll find a kind of craft that you like to travel on and just keep making that over and over again. But at first in the game, I wasn't quite sold on this mechanic, because it took so long to craft things when I was unused to the system, and it kind of just felt like it probably would have been better just walking there instead. But then the depths comes in clutch once more with a brand new mechanic, and if you didn't pick this up early game, I am so sorry for you, because it makes the game really rough then. Yes, I'm talking about the auto-build mechanic. With this baby, you can smack your machines together in record time by just using a favorite recipe, as long as you have enough Zonite in your inventory. You can just click a little button and boom, you've got yourself a rocket plane. A boom, you've got yourself a little turret man. A boom, you got yourself a boom. I also love being able to fuse different materials onto my shields, like minecarts or rockets. They really take the shield surfing traversal from Breath of the Wild to the next level. With minecarts, you can not only grind along rails, but now along pretty much any surface you want as long as it's sloped downwards. And rockets are a fantastic alternative for vertical traversal. And do I dare get into the ascend mechanic in the game? It's a genius idea for getting out of caves, as you can now just go into the roof of a cave and pop out on the outside world, and you don't have to backtrack through it again. And it also adds some of that more vertical traversal focus that I talked about earlier. It even allows for new puzzle design, where you can now design rooms where the only way to get in is through the bottom. You just have to be on the lookout for strange grate-like surfaces. Ah, like that right there. And now for my favorite part of any game, exploration. I thought I liked open world games just because there was a lot to find and do in them, but playing games like Hogwarts Legacy recently made me realize that if what I find and do isn't particularly rewarding in some way, the game surely won't keep my interest for long. So in order to make it rewarding, either the treasure can be a useful item that helps you on your journey, or the journey itself can be the reward, if it's entertaining or interesting enough. Personally, I prefer the latter, and lucky for me, Tears of the Kingdom is way better at this than Hogwarts Legacy. Sorry, Hogwarts Legacy fans. Yikes. Mostly because each new area offers a new adventure for you to partake in. For example, when you hit Kakariko Forest, you'll find that once again, the Lost Woods are untraversable. And the torch trick from Breath of the Wild won't work either, so don't even bother trying. But you might notice there's a little depths hole a little ways back, near the entrance of the forest. And if you dive into it, you'll find out that there's a little pillar that you can travel up into the Lost Woods. You'll find the Deku Tree is ailed with some kind of strange disease. You'll dive down into his roots, only to find Gloom Hands and the ferocious Phantom Ganon. You may have seen this enemy before as you were traveling around the land, but likely you just ran away from it because their threat level is something like seeing a Guardian in Breath of the Wild. They're pretty terrifying. But in this arena you have no way out. You're in a closed circle and you have to fight or die trying. And overcoming this challenge and the whole storyline of it all was just such a wonderful little package of an adventure that I think it's one of my favorite moments in the entire game. And it doesn't hurt that it puts you on the line for one of the best collectibles in the game. Yes, that's right. Hooah! The Master Sword. Many times, of course, you'll come across shrines that are pretty comparable to the ones in Breath of the Wild in both quality and design. But now you have your new set of tools to interact with them, so they come off as pretty unique and different in that regard. So shrines are as you'd expect, but the one other big thing outside of shrines and towns, of course, is caves. Oh, so many caves! Like this one right here. Hello there! They're mostly empty anyways. They're almost like a mini dungeon in their own right. You've got treasure to find, secret passages that lead to these secret goblin creatures, which have a collectible all their own, which rival the amount of Koroks in the game. Not quite as large, you understand, but over 100, so like, that's still a lot, and they're in every single cave, so you best get hunting. Each of these caves, though, is really interesting and unique to explore and find as you stumble across them in your adventure. Some cut through landscapes, others just go deeper into them, and sometimes you gotta cut up through a cave in order to get into a secret area that you can't get into anywhere else. It's kind of hard to imagine the game without them, and while they are an incredible addition, they're not flawless in every regard. For example, the Akala Citadel, I was really looking forward to seeing what they might do with the inside of that, and if there would be a cave there. And there was, and when I got there, it was a standard monster cave with no Akala architecture whatsoever. I guess I'll just have to go play Age of Calamity if I want to see that. And I almost forgot. The toughest part of any exploration, the Korok mask. Do not, I tell you, do not wear that mask, because if you do, you will go crazy, because it will ding every 10 seconds, and you'll be walking along enjoying yourself, and then ding, 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 oh, gotta find a Korok. You find the Korok, and then immediately it starts dinging again, and you gotta find it all over again, and it literally drives me crazy. It's much more enjoyable to just simply play the game, walk through it, and stumble across Koroks organically instead of having to mindlessly search for them every 10 seconds, because, oh god, you do not need all of them. There are too many. Do not wear the Korok mask, please. I would be quite remiss, though, if I didn't mention the greatest discoveries of all. Yes, of course, it's dungeons. In this game, the dungeons, instead of being walking machinations, are more physical places and buildings that you can actually see and visit in the world instead of warping to them, and you can approach from any angle. I'm a little bummed they kept the whole find the key things to open the one big boss door instead of a more traditional Zelda design, but I don't really see how we could fit traditional Zelda design into Breath of the Wild's more open structure better, so I suppose it's a good compromise. And it's much better than the walking machinations that Breath of the Wild, for sure. And part of that is the presentation of these areas, where they're not just simply structures that are out in the world, but they are long-lost ancient buildings to be discovered by you, the adventurer. And they've been around in this world for forever. It's just that nobody's found them until now. It really flushes out the world's lore and makes them super exciting and interesting to find, but my favorites have to be the more compact designs of the Desert and Fire Temple. I feel like the dungeon design can shine through a lot better when you're in these enclosed rooms and you have to go from room section to room section in these single isolated puzzles, as opposed to the more free design of the Water Temple and Air Temple, where you just kind of fly around the dungeon, flying straight from point A to point B to get these different keys. More freedom is always nice, of course, for a more laid-back playstyle, but for me personally, I'd pick a tightly designed single-room puzzle over that any day. Spoiler warning, it's story time! And if you've hung around this long already and you didn't get spoiled at all, well, I don't really know if this is for you, but I'm gonna be going into the end game stuff and the middle game stuff and the beginning game stuff. I'm gonna talk about all of it, so if you don't want to hear any of that, you better get out of here right now. Alright. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the spoils train ain't stopping for no one. I think the stories in Zelda games have been generally pretty light over the years, with most of them being a Ganon or Ganon-like taking over the world, Zelda getting kidnapped at some point, and Link having to go and save the day. Each game, of course, have its own flavor of this story, but Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild kind of split up their story through these memories scattered throughout the world. In Breath of the Wild, I feel like these are more of a side quest and optional and only give you brief glimpses into what happened in the past of Hyrule. But in Tears of the Kingdom, the story is much more fleshed out and much more interesting to follow along. Mostly because it follows along Zelda. Oh, did I not mention Zelda yet? Yeah, that's right, Legend of Zelda, that one, that Zelda, Big Z, her. Well, at the beginning of this game, this happens. Whoa. Leave room for Jesus. Oops. So essentially, Zelda gets schwarped into the past at the beginning of this game, and while you're messing around doing whatever in Hyrule, she's trying to save not only past Hyrule, but also future Hyrule where you're at by restoring the Master Sword. What made this entire story for me, though, was wondering how she was going to do exactly that. How do you cure the Master Sword? Is she just going to slowly put power in it for 1,000 years? How's she going to live for 1,000 years? That doesn't make sense. And then they mention the sacrifice. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, they're gonna kill off Zelda, essentially, right? Like, what? This is the Zelda, you can't just kill her, that'd be ridiculous. And then later in the game, guess what happens? Oops, I guess, Zelda was just like, gone. Just like that. But yeah, I just sat in denial for like the whole game, but once the scene hits, wow, does it hit. And it's got to be one of the most emotional scenes in all of Zelda. I mean, the emotion coming out of Zelda's voice, the cost of the sacrifice, it's insane. And it lasts until the end of the game, until they dial it back and they're like, oh, just kidding, magic, everything's fine. And I'm a little bit peeved at that, but I guess, you know, happy endings are good, so let's go. The rest of the story is definitely much more by the books, as Ganon's sprite is evil, you have to go and stop it throughout the land, there's 4 different locations, you've heard this before, and in the end you go and fight him, but that doesn't mean they skimped out on the finale, as it is as grand, as epic as a game like this deserves. The only story that feels like it doesn't belong here is the cutscenes after every boss, and I don't know why they did it like this, but every cutscene is essentially the same, just from a different perspective. And when I say different perspective, I don't mean like, oh, a new side of the story. I mean, it was the person standing here instead of the person standing here. The dialogue's almost like one-to-one. It's terrible. It makes beating a boss almost feel like a punishment every time, and I don't know why they did it like this. Overall, the story was more interesting than Breath of the Wild, and I think that's probably because they focused on the best Zelda we've ever had in the series. Alright, I can't believe I waited so long to talk more about the new mechanics, because the fuse mechanic goes crazy. It solves a lot of the problems that Breath of the Wild had, one being the elemental stones like topaz, rubies, and sapphires. They're really begging to be made into elemental weapons through crafting, and now you can finally do that. And that's just the start of it. With hundreds of materials in the game, many new ones thanks to enemies all dropping unique materials when they die, along with the many great weapons that the game already had and new ones they've added in for Tears of the Kingdom, it seems like the combos in this game are nearly endless to create. But sometimes it'll be less about creativity and more about which combo has the biggest number at the end of it. Because at the end of the day, damage is usually what people want. But that doesn't mean it's not fun to blow enemies around with a leaf or hit them with a toy hammer, freeze them, electrify them, fire them, leading to all different kinds of playstyle. The fusing also addresses some of the complaints with weapon degradation, as every time you fight a high-level enemy now, you not only get their weapon, which is probably pretty good, but also material that you can fuse with that weapon. The higher level an enemy is, the higher power their fuse material is. So you'll always be getting some kind of good weapon out of it, no matter what. I know some people might not like crafting as much in general, but the click of the L button and the click of an A button to fuse is much easier than most crafting in games, and will really only take a second of your time. And aside from combat, vehicle crafting can get pretty crazy pretty fast. I mean, I personally just used like planes and rockets and springs to launch myself around the map fast, but I also loved my wheelie scooter that I could scoot around the depths in. Faster traversal really cuts down on the time that you have to spend wandering aimlessly throughout the world and just cuts right to the meat of the game. Although if you want to wander aimlessly, you still can, because there's plenty of Koroks, quests, shrines, and items galore to discover for you. Oh, also there's recall, but I don't recall using it that much. Like, it can get you to the Sky Islands, but like, aside from that, it doesn't really feel like a core mechanic of the game. Like the Ascend and the Fuse and the Ultra Hand abilities. It just doesn't do as much for me. This game's quests are way more interesting than Breath of the Wild's in my opinion, and part of that is helped because of Lookout Landing, a place where all the people gather in order to help you defeat Ganon, and give you little tips on what's happening in all the different areas of the land. My biggest thing I wanted to see in Tears of the Kingdom was the reconstruction of Hyrule, and I would say that's sort of achieved here. They have these Bolson signs all around Hyrule that say, hey, the reconstruction effort of Hyrule is going on great, we're fixing everything in Hyrule. But once you get to the towns, you'll realize that aside from Tarrey Town and Lookout Landing, there really isn't much like different physically in the structure of the buildings. I mean, like, they have mushroom houses now, but like, the buildings are still the same, you know what I'm saying? With the main exception being Lurelin Village, which is under the attack of pirates, where the whole village will be destroyed by the time you get there, but once you fend off the pirates, you can help rebuild the village yourself. Which is cool to see it rebuilt, but unfortunately there's not really anything new here once you rebuild it from Breath of the Wild. It's just kind of the same village again. Again, I would have liked to see a new town built in either the sky or the depths. That would have been really interesting, and specifically the depths, you could have like gathered adventurers that have fallen accidentally into the depths. Because, you know, you run across people in the depths all the time, but they're always Yiga clan members, so it's never really a surprise. But what if there was a chance that they weren't Yiga members and instead just regular people looking for help? And then you could recruit them to join your village, and your village would slowly grow the more people you recruit. That would be a really interesting and cool side quest to do in the depths, and flesh out the depths even a little more. I should say that technically you build up Lookout Landing throughout the game, with, you know, you recruiting all the different races of Hyrule to help you out. But it's really just kind of like, oh, birds are flying in the sky now. Oh, a Goron's rolling around in the town square. And nothing like functionally changes about Lookout Landing, as far as I can recall. So you build like a stable once. Cool. Oh! Although I will say Lookout Landing is great for one thing, and that's that NPCs are actually trying to save the world. Yes, you heard me right, there are people fighting back against the monsters. You can stumble upon these raid battles where you fight alongside Hylians to defeat the monster's den. And it's a fantastic idea that implements the gameplay ideas with the world-building ideas, because it makes sense that these people would want to fight back against Ganon at this point. They've already seen him destroyed once in the first game, so now maybe their confidence is raised to fight back with Link and save the day. Although I do find it a bit odd that there's no raid for Lurelin Village. I guess maybe they just decided after the pirates destroyed it, it wasn't worth going to oust the pirates. But it would have been cool to, like, you know, recruit the Lurelin villagers to fight back against the pirates. I also like the search for Zelda quests, you know, with this Birdman, but not this Birdman, because this Birdman's gone, but this Birdman's here now, and he's like, alright, but this one's definitely cooler. The two of these that I remember is the underwear quest, where you just run into a cave with nothing but your underwear on to prove that you're rad to these two guys. And it's not only funny, but it's also challenging, and the mix of those two is, you know, perfect, I'd say. And there's the horse quest, where you have to go save Zelda's horse in a Gleeok's lair, and you have to sneak in and sneak out, and if you don't sneak, you will get your goose cooked, because those Gleeoks are intense. Which reminds me, I haven't even talked about Gleeoks yet. We haven't even talked about any of these. Yes, unlike Breath of the Wild, where you've got moblins and bokoblins on land, and if you're fighting in water, Islas Alphos, they dig a lot deeper for Tears of the Kingdom. You've got Gibdos in the desert that are immune to physical damage. You've got Horriblins in the caves that hang from the ceiling, so you have to shoot them with a bow and arrow to knock them down. Like-likes that thankfully don't eat your shield, and Zonite constructs that can use the fuse mechanic just like the player can, which allows them to create many crazy weapons and leads to all kinds of unique interactions. And then there's the mini-bosses. We've got boss bokoblins, flux constructs, Froxes in the depths, gloom hands that lurk around like guardians and chase you down, and the last but not least for sure is Gleeoks, the most terrifying of all enemies, because their health pool is insane. They soak up every hit you do like it's nothing, and their attacks are so widespread. Every fight I had against one was a true challenge, and though I burned through most of my weapons when I fought them, it was still loads of fun. And don't even get me started on King Gleeok, which is an amalgamation of all the different Gleeoks together in one form, one kingly, beastly monster. And for those of you that found it in the depths, oh, God rest your soul. The bosses wholly are much better around this time too. Instead of just being blights themed after different elements of the dungeons, we actually get bosses themed around the dungeons. And I think my favorite's gotta be the Queen Gibdo, who spawns in Gibdos during the match and they speedily crawl at you, which is terrifying. And you have to decide whether you want to prioritize the spawning towers or take out the boss as fast as possible just to end the fight immediately. It's a frantic terror of a fight, and I wouldn't have it any other. And of course, Marmaled Goma is one of my favorite incarnations of Goma that we've ever seen. You get to break away his pieces on the ground, and then he crawls up to the ceiling. You gotta calculate your angles to knock him down from above and finish him off. And of course, you get to fight with Yunobo too, who is the best guardian, by the way, you know. He's come a long way since his humble beginnings as a coward in Breath of the Wild. So in the end, Tears of the Kingdom brings some cool new mechanics to the table, grandly expands upon the world, brings some much needed enemy variety, and an exhilarating story with an epic conclusion to wrap it all off. And while I would have loved to see more reconstruction efforts and new towns added to the game, I fell in love with Tears of the Kingdom as much as I did with Breath of the Wild, if not more. It may not have had the same impact as Breath of the Wild since it's a sequel and not entirely new, but in my opinion, it surpasses Breath of the Wild in pretty much every single way, which will make it hard to go back to Breath of the Wild in the future. Obviously, if you love Breath of the Wild, you've already played this game, but if you haven't, well, this is a perfect spot to hop in as well. Although I must say the start of this game is a little bit bumpier than Breath of the Wild, because the Great Plateau is a much better starter area than the Sky Island. You know what else is a little bit bumpy? That Ganondorf's chiseled chest. I mean, have you seen that, man? Oh my god! Wow! Thank you so much for watching this video and hanging around on this channel for as long as you did. Hopefully you enjoyed our first foray into the Zelda series. It most certainly will not be the last. As a matter of fact, I planned to look at every single Zelda game in a Zelda Seriolution a while back, but I never got around to it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to look at every single other Zelda game, or if you want to go back to other, more cursed content on this channel. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.